Your audience may never compliment you about your audio, but may stop watching because of it. Hey, welcome to another episode of The Creative One. Thank you for finding us. Today's topic is an interesting one. We're talking about something that audiences rarely talk about, which is audio. It's that invisible layer that creatives, or it's that invisible layer that creates emotion, that gives you the mood. It's that feel in look and feel. And that's why we thought it's important. And joining me is two gentlemen that are going to help me unpack this. It is Jean-Michel Wickli and Rici Martins from Method and Madness. It's from a Johannesburg-based Dolby Atmos mixing studio and immersive audio company. So they're going to help me unpack this very important topic. It's about how audio is evolving, and we'll look at the nitty-gritties when it comes to audio. Gentlemen, Jean-Michel and Rici, thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Fantastic.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. So I think let's start there. I mean, let's talk about Dolby Atmos. For somebody that doesn't know what Dolby Atmos, they're hearing the term for the first time, but also for that person that is familiar with surround sound. You guys, this is your forte. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, I'm sure you can also, while doing that, tell us a bit about yourselves.
Well, let's start with Dolby Atmos. Yeah, I mean, you use the word surround sound there, and I think so many people think that that's what it is, but it's really the way you want to think about it is audio delivery format. So in the past, we've had things like mono, stereo, 5.1, 7.1, quad. Those are all different delivery formats that are all speaker-based, all what we call channel-based audio. Dolby Atmos is a little bit different in the sense that it works with audio objects. So what makes them unique is the fact that they can have positional data in 3D space. So there is an element of immersion. But what's more important is that the format is actually scalable. So if you think of, something like a stereo file, it can only play back really on a stereo system, and a 5.1 file can only play back on a 5.1 system. Whereas what a Dolby Atmos file can do is it can play back in a big immersive speaker layout like what we've got in our studio, 7.1.4 layout, which has got height speakers, speakers all around you, but it can scale all the way down to stereo, which won't be immersive. It'll sound just like regular stereo. But the trick is that you've done one mix. You've done one mix for your project, and it can play back on 2 speakers. It can play back on 60 speakers in a cinema and everything in between.
Think of it as musical origami.
Yeah, it's like if you think of it as musical origami of this thing that can almost fold up and down in an interesting way. So, cars now have Dolby Atmos in them. The new Volvo ES90's got 25 speakers inside. You've got all these sound bars at home that's got like 18 drivers in or whatever. And Dolby Atmos as a format can just take advantage of the consumer playback devices that have as many speakers as what they have, everything again from stereo all the way into immersive format. So it's really the way you want to think about it is that it's this scalable, flexible format that you do one mix in, and if it's done properly, it scales to all of those different devices.
And there's currently over 3 billion devices in existence in the world now that
Over how many?
Over 3 billion.
Okay.
So if you go to your hi-fi corporation or whatever it is that you buy your consumer devices, you'll see a lot of them have a sticker that says Dolby Atmos supported. And a lot of the problem is a lot of people don't know what that means. What that essentially means is that like Ricky's saying, there's a multiple array of speakers in those devices, and there's a Dolby Atmos decoder in those devices that then figures out, oh, I've got 5 speakers, 3 speakers, 2 speakers, however many speakers that device has, and it will optimally use the configuration and play back the sound at its most optimum level.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned quite a number of things where you can have that experience. You also mentioned cars and obviously at home, but you've got to be geared up for it, right?
So the consumer device will support Atmos. So if you buy a TV or a soundbar or a set of headphones or a car, wearable, so the new Meta Quest glasses, there's a bit of controversy around them, but they support Atmos. Things like Vision Pro. There's a bunch of devices, like James said, over those 3 billion that's already sold. MacBooks, iPhones, laptops, smart home speakers, home entertainment systems. So if it supports Dolby Atmos, it'll take Dolby Atmos files, and the
Hmm.
device will automatically decode them into the appropriate layouts that the speaker has.
So even on TV displays, I mean, if
Yep.
your TV, I mean, from what you said, it would have to have multiple speakers to be able to play it
Not
back.
necessarily. So if you buy
Yeah.
the new Samsung TV that supports Dolby
Yeah.
Atmos, that most likely has two speakers at the back of it. So what you're going to get there is you're only getting stereo essentially. But again, the magic is that it's that same mix that we did that can then play back on that TV. Where it gets interesting for TVs, for example, is if you then pair that TV. I know with Samsung, they've got a thing called Q Symphony where when you pair up a Samsung soundbar, it can then use the TV speakers in addition to the soundbar
I see.
speakers, where it can
Yeah.
start integrating them into the maybe play the heights or the
And
some of the
share
other
this,
stuff or
yeah.
the center channel, use that for that or whatever. So so then it can use like a 5.1 system on a soundbar in combination with those TV speakers. But if you use the TV on its own, it's just going to sound like stereo. It's not going to be immersive. But the magic again is that anything that's Dolby Atmos will scale, whether it's the TV with a soundbar or a fuller
Sure.
soundbar with like rear speakers, whatever the case is.
And that's not only for now specific, like we focus on music at our studio. We've done some
Okay.
film stuff before as well, but you think of all your Netflix, Apple TV, Disney Plus, Hulu, that's all delivered in Atmos. So you'll see when you're scrolling through Netflix, it says Dolby Vision or Dolby
Yeah, Dolby Vision is the
the
visual
visual.
side of these things, and it'll have a little Dolby Atmos logo as well.
Yeah, and then gaming as well. So PlayStation and Xbox support Dolby Atmos. So when you're playing FIFA or whatever, the game itself tries to be again, if you've got enough speakers, so say you've got the sound bar with the rear speakers, it'll try and
Hmm.
place you in the game. So you've got the crowd sounds around you. And that again won't be immersive if you only got the TV speakers, but if you've got the full sound bar system, great. Then it'll optimally use those speakers to portray the sound.
Fantastic. So I think I'd like to revisit Dolby Atmos, but I want us to go back to kind of like the basics about sound. Um, one of the biggest misconceptions about production is that audiences care more about visuals rather than sound as such. So why is sound such an important part of storytelling from your point of view? I know you guys deal a lot with music. And but I mean, just give us your insights in as far
Well,
as
one,
the
if you watch a film and
yeah.
you mute the sound, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it can
Where
look great, but you still won't know what's going on.
so there's an
Yeah.
element in what the sound is such a huge part of the content, that you're watching that, I think you mentioned it earlier where you said it's the part that's not seen though. We hear it and it's often then forgotten. Like if you think of productions and things, so often if a film has a whatever their production
Budget.
budget is, often it's only 10% that is reserved for sound.
And it's often considered an
And
afterthought.
and it's often, but I would say there's been a bunch of studies where people much rather would listen to something with a slightly worse image but with better sound than the other way around. Like it's just if you imagine being in a theater and you can't hear what's going on, it's annoying.
I mean,
If you're in a
yeah, a tangible example is I've literally stopped watching a TV show before because the sound mix was so bad.
yeah.
And
So great visuals wouldn't really compensate for audio,
oh,
basically.
the show can be
No,
great, but
yeah, it
if
can't.
I'm not enjoying
It's the other way around.
show, I'm gonna just switch off.
Yeah, and to your question as to why it's so important, I think it's because visuals is one thing. We can look at an image and we can see someone cry and we can do all these things. It doesn't necessarily if you watch a thing on mute, it doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily move you. Whereas the right notes at the right time or the right sound effect or the right it can really be the thing that stirs up the actual emotion.
Mm.
And whether that's music, gaming, like James says, like if you're playing we plugged in a PlayStation once into our Atmos system, and if you play like FIFA and you've got that crowd around you, it transports you to that location in a way that the visual can't necessarily in that way, unless you're talking about like all these VR things that's coming, and even that is going to require immersive audio as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the future, and the big thing for us is we're trying to, as a studio, we're trying to build community around this thing. Just
Hmm.
not only at Dolby Atmos, but in general, trying to build community because I think we often find in our other escapades in the entertainment industry, we find that often people are very siloed in their working, and we're trying to unsilo the creative industry in South Africa, build community, and then at the same time kind of just educate people around this new technology because we believe it's the future of audio and as a result, like Ricky was saying, the Vision Pro doesn't exist without immersive audio, and we want to plan for the future already now rather than catch up when the thing arrives. So we might be ahead of
Yeah.
our time slightly, but I'd rather play in that world than catch up after the fact.
There's probably about 20% from the little that I picked up in terms of research, about 20% of homes, as an example, are get up in South Africa for Atmos. So we're pretty much getting there as such, but maybe not as much as I'm sure for especially for you guys that are in production would like it to be. So where are the current sort of trends going as far as Dolby Atmos is concerned, but more about where it's being adopted. Is it more in film? Is it television, music?
Oh, the
Is it
current push is
streaming?
music. Yeah, the current push is music,
Oh,
and
okay.
streaming. Yeah. So I would say it's across all entertainment media. So like Jay mentioned earlier, film, TV, gaming, music, all of your immersive wearable experiences.
Yeah,
There's definitely a big push for immersive audio in all of those domains. I think in terms of the consumer experience, 20% is actually a very good number. If you think of how long it took people to adopt stereo, it took decades,
yeah,
for house to be equipped with stereo, not just, and even then, mono survived for a very long time after stereo was a thing. And even today, you'll still find mono
it's still,
systems. So
yeah,
Dolby Atmos isn't necessarily a pure replacement for stereo in any real sense. It's a different thing and it's an addition to it. And because even like I say, the Dolby Atmos content can fall down to play into stereo as well.
Because
So
radio and your clicks will still need a stereo deliverable, and you're
yeah,
not going to get immersive audio while you're shopping at clicks. But the beauty of that deliverable is that you can get the stereo file and play it back
yeah.
at clicks. But then also, if you have an immersive format, then it scales up again.
Yeah, and then to your question just about the adoption and where that adoption is happening is, if you think of the consumer experience, it is things like cars, headphones, soundbars. It's all the consumer devices that are starting to support Dolby Atmos, and I think something like cars, there's over 30 car brands already that supports Atmos. It's not just one or two,
yeah.
and new ones are they all being added all the time. So. Yeah, I think it's really across the board that the whole thing we see a trend of the entire thing scaling up
I
over
mean, it's
time.
been in film and TV for the last 15 odd years or so, maybe even slightly
Yeah,
more.
17 years I think or
Yeah.
something.
So
Yeah,
it's been a mainstay of cinemas, or
Yeah.
the high format cinemas, IMAXs and whatnot. But it's also been adopted into your regular cinemas
yeah,
because even as an independent cinema as the Bioscope in Joburg, they have a 5-1 system. What you used to have to do now for film and TV specifically is now you'd have to have a stereo mix for your TV, you'd have to have a separate 5-1 mix, and you'd have to have
mhm,
a 7-1 mix for the Ster-Kinekov cinema. That's 3 separate projects that you'd have to do and run. Whereas now with Dolby Atmos, you're doing one project and you can bounce out from one project whatever you need for that platform.
yeah. No, I picked up on some of the Netflix or some of these video on demand platforms that I've gone back as far as 2015, where you see that sign of Dolby
Mm.
Atmos.
Yeah.
Um, but let's talk about post production. I don't know in your field whether you do have people say we'll fix it in post. I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
phrase
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
you
all the
guys
time.
deal with. So how much can actually be fixed in post production? And I think this is important, especially for people who sit on the side of the client, and as well as for those who are in production, of course. How
Well,
much today can be fixed? Because there's so much uh, what could be fixed 15 or what could not be fixed in post about 15 years ago. Some elements can be fixed today, but what are the limits?
so for me, it comes down to intentionality, and that's a very big point. Is that if you're doing a production, you have sound as a consideration, you're recording sound specifically and intentionally. Whereas if you're talking to like we'll fix it in post, now you have to scramble to do something, make a square fit into a circle kind of situation, which can be done, but it's just a lot more work. And this is why I say intentionality is such an important thing. Is that often productions, like Ricky was saying earlier, they only allocate 10% of their budget to sound as it's like an afterthought. Whereas if you're intentionally mixing for it, you're going to be recording extra elements. You're going to give it its as much love and attention as it deserves, and that will also enhance the production at the end of the day. I mean, Rici also does a lot of film and editing, so he can maybe speak to that.
Yeah, my sentiment here is the question is almost the wrong one. The question for me is,
Hmm.
what kind of creative do you want to be? Do you
Hmm.
want to be someone who's willing to do subpar work and then have to figure it out in post, or have to try and quote unquote fix it in post? Or do you want to know someone that deeply understands the post processing and what's just true post workflows and what you can actually execute on in post, and then consciously when you're creating the thing go, oh, I'm not we're going to fix it in post, but I know that there's a post process that if we capture it this way, we use that post process, it'll get us to where we actually want to be.
Which is the
I
intention.
think, yeah, I think so often what happens with these things is that people, when they fix it in post, is that there's a misalignment in their head in terms of what they want to create, what they're actually capturing, and then going, oh, we'll figure it out in post. So for me, that's not being very sure about the whole thing. And I don't think that that's a good place to make anything reliably good, like, or repeatably good. Like you might get lucky on one project, but then the next project, it's going to be a disaster. So for me, it's more about the approach that I always take is I want to understand what are all the processes. So there's obviously something like, is EQing a vocal fixing it in post? Yes, it is to some extent, because the way that we capture the dialogue, for example, isn't the way we want it to sound. And there's no ways to capture it with just the nature of how microphones works. So if you
Yeah.
technically about it, something even like just EQing and compressing a vocal is fixing it in post. But I think we don't use it that way because we understand that no, there's a way we capture it, then we mix
Yeah.
it, and these are the tools that we have to mix it. And if we capture it in this way, we use those tools in post, then we get to a result that we want. And I think that's a much better, healthier approach to get to, like I say, reliable content versus this idea of, oh, we'll just figure it out in post. It means that you
Yeah.
actually don't
No
know what
intent.
there's
There's
no
no
vision,
intention.
there's no intention, there's no idea as to how this whole thing actually works. Yeah.
So it's planning for it. I mean, I like
Yeah.
what you said with regards to recording with intention and just to plan around your audio production. And I think some of the time, just to be fair to filmmakers or production people, is that obviously they do not obviously plan for distortion or anything going wrong, but then they feel like or think that maybe it can be fixed in
Yeah.
post, but there's
Well, this
certain
is
things
why
that
you
you can't.
hire this is why you hire someone who's done it a million times,
Yeah,
because they're not gonna mess it up. They're not gonna get the distortion. They're not gonna get the,
yeah,
because they're professionals. Like they're good at the thing. And I find so often what happens is people again go into something without having the right people on board or the right skills on board, and then you land up in tricky situations where you now have this disaster of an audio file that you have to try and fix somehow. And yes, we're lucky that to some extent the tools are great at the moment, but I don't think
yeah.
that should ever be your goal is to say, let's capture whatever and we'll fix it in post. I think it's a very lackluster
Approach.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah, getting back to the exciting part of our discussion, which is, in my view, Dolby Atmos. I mean, you guys took us through something that was exciting when this is how we met. Obviously, for the viewers, we were at MediaTek, and you guys had a tailor-made studio that was set up there, and it was set up for to give you that immersive experience, right? And I experienced it. In fact, I must say that after that, I went on to buy my two speakers that to add into to the soundbar that I have.
Oh, amazing.
That's how much,
How did it
yeah.
turn out?
Huh? Oh yeah, it's
How did it turn
beautiful,
out?
beautiful. My kids love it as well because even with
Yeah.
games, they indulge in it. So my interest is in live events. I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of setting up that would have to go into having that as part of a live event. I mean, which is pretty much close to what you guys had done, but it was not obviously a live event. I mean, is it at that point where it can be used for live events? Have you ever done something like that, or is South Africa at that stage where it can be used
I
for
think so.
live
Yeah.
events?
I think South Africa is. I think the technology isn't. So, and what I mean with that is it exists. Dolby is
Yeah.
doing 4,000 seater venues. I think the current band they have as a residency is Maroon 5, but they've done Aerosmith. They've done a whole bunch of different artists in these massive venues. People are doing stuff on, and they're doing stuff on smaller scales as well.
Ministry of Sound of
But
London, for example, in the DJ world, they've got a full Atmos rig in
in
their
the
club.
club, yeah.
And they're
Where is this?
is currently working with
The
the
Ministry of Sound
yeah.
in
Oh,
London. Yeah.
okay.
So they're working with Pioneer to build CDJs that can now support Dolby Atmos files. The mixing desks will get like an add-on thing. So
Yeah,
we're
so
thinking
basically all of this stuff is being used by Dolby to at this point in time
beta test.
on a public platform to host these concerts, but it's all being beta tested behind. It's not publicly available software and hardware yet. So there's a world in which I think in the next year or two that stuff gets released in the same way as what the production Atmos tools we have for post-production exists. It's integrated into Pro Tools now. It's integrated into all your DAW things. There's the standalone renders and all the software pieces you need to make it work. I believe in the next year or two, those things will probably, from a live perspective, will start getting released to be able to be used in live
And
production.
us as a studio are very excited to be at the forefront of that. Like we want to be the first people in Africa to try and play with those things. So we've been in contact with Dolby to kind of just be in touch and see if we can have access to their tech or their processes when they actually do become publicly available. And to Ricky's point, a lot of the Dolby Atmos workflow stuff didn't exist a year and a half ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You buy a separate piece of gear just to get Apple Music to play into a Dolby Atmos system. Now it's just plug and play and integrate it. So the scale at which this integration is happening is immense. It's happening at a really fast rate, and I think it's really exciting to see that because the biggest misnomer is that people don't know what they're listening to. They know it sounds good, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
And I think this is
Yeah.
the miseducation that's been happening, or not miseducation, not education at all. But we're trying to help bring that knowledge set to people.
Yeah, and then just to your
Yeah.
point, setting up must be a mission. The big 4,000 seats of venues that Dolby's doing, they're basically dividing it into smaller pockets of 512 setups. And it takes about then 400 speakers to fill the whole venue to cover. And the benefit of that then is that the people in the back is getting the same mix as the people in the front, essentially. So you're getting a much more unified concert experience for even like something compared to like front seats and cheaper seats or whatever the case is. So
But
really amazing.
I also think to again thinking of the future that doesn't exist yet, but there will be a world in which you can buy a Vision Pro and then you can be at a concert. So you can sell another layer of live ticket experiences where if the venue is mic'd up in a way, somebody can be in Guatemala and watch a Amapiano show with the Vision Pro on and feel like they're actually at the show. So there's another
Yeah.
level of
Yes.
quote live that will come into play there, which I think is very exciting. But again, has to be done properly because if it's not mixed properly, you're not going to want to experience that thing.
So with that 5-1, you said what is it? 512
512.
setup.
Yep.
How many speakers you said would need to be in
400.
minimum? 400.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite a crazy
400.
setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all
And then
beta
you got to imagine all of those speakers have to be time aligned and they have to be
it's a bit of a nightmare, but this
yeah.
is why they're beta testing. It's just to figure out what the best
Yeah.
solution. That might not be the final solution for this thing.
Yeah.
This is just
Yeah.
them going, okay, well, this is one way of doing this. How do we now scale this to become bigger or smaller?
Yeah.
So audiences are obviously and consumers are already experiencing this, even in South Africa, of course, with headphones and with at home and in cars, as you said. But let's look at the value chain, right? So
Mhm.
the consumer is on the receiving end, but you've got creators, you've got production companies, guys like yourselves, and you've got broadcasters. What is needed? So if I am currently, let's say, for instance, working on a documentary, right? A film documentary. In that value chain, that means every single one of those aspects of that value chain have to be geared up for Dolby Atmos.
Not necessarily, no.
No.
So at the production level, all you need is a little bit of knowledge in terms of what to record, what do you capture? Because most of what you're going to capture is just a still mono and stereo assets, the same as what we've done. There are some new miking techniques to be able to mic up specific Atmos things if you wanted to, immersive audio, but you could get away with just recording. So if you're recording, let's say for example, you're recording room tone for a documentary. Now you instead of just putting up one or two mics to record a stereo room tone, you might put up 5 or 6 mics across the room so that we can place them in different places around the room. It's really just a consideration of, am I producing this thing in a way that has enough content and enough layers so that when we get to final mix, that there's
Mhm.
enough content. And that I believe you can do with just a basic understanding of how Dolby Atmos works. It's not that you have
Okay.
to do it. You have to have the full mixing setup to be able to record that. So, I mean, and if you think of, there's so many field recorders that's got multiple channels in them, that's got an 8-channel thing or whatever. So you could totally use that. And instead of just plugging in 2 mics, you're plugging in 8 and spreading them out across a area to get that room tone, or when you're capturing Foley, all of that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's one example. But I think it's, yeah, from a production perspective, it's really just an understanding and a consideration for the format. Again, an intentionality, I think.
Yeah.
And then when you get to like pre-production or production sort of areas, it would be
Yeah.
helpful to have some form of immersive setup. So here it's valuable to maybe have something like a 5.1 or a 5.1.2 that you can do rough mixes on and start placing stuff. And then really when you get to final mix is where we want a proper calibrated system so that we can make
Yeah.
those critical decisions. So it's only in
Yeah.
the final stage where you really require to have that proper
in the
calibrated
in the
system.
music world, we've often told producers and stuff, look, it's great to have a final mix set up with the we've got 12 speakers in this room. You don't
What is
need
it?
that.
Oh,
A lot of
nice.
guys still have 2 speakers as they because they're recording at home, they're
Oh,
making
okay.
beats at home. And like Ricky says, you don't need to have all 11 speakers to then consider the applications of where this is. You can just record more sounds so that you can layer them and intentionally say, oh, I'm recording this sound with the intention of it going into the back speaker or moving
But you
around.
need
And
the software, right?
No,
no,
no, you
it's
can well,
built
you can
in.
do all of it. So for example, in music production, it's something like, if let's say there's a pad, right? Are you
Hmm.
just using a singular sound for that? Or are you layering 2 sounds so that when the listener listens to it, they just hear one part. So it's not complicating the production in any real sense.
Oh, I
But now
see.
I've got 2 sounds that I can take in an Atmos mix and I can place one in front of me and one behind me to get that sense of
Yeah.
being immersed in the sound again. So that's one thing, if you're layering percussion and things, are you putting in enough things? Like, it's just, again, that knowledge and consideration for the format more than you don't have to be able to do that in real time. It can all just be stereo files stacked on each other.
Yeah.
But and then we can separate those out in the Atmos mix phase. But it's that consideration that's super
What it will
important.
do is
So,
for
but there
sure.
is that level of Atmos mix phase
Yes,
after.
Yeah.
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
But
And
there's
it's
just
and
been that
and
consideration.
in that final mix phase, that's where, like I say, you want that proper calibrated system so that you can do that properly.
Again, I think with music, for me, there's been such a long period where you've just been oversaturated with music. It's just been
Mhm.
like, I think there's some statistic that a billion, well, not a billion, like 1 million songs a day are uploaded to Spotify. It's some ridiculous statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and nobody can consume all of that music. And what this does is just brings back this intentionality again, and it will showcase the poorer production versus the more intentional production. So a producer who then takes a stereo loop and doesn't actually recreate that stereo loop is just going to have a bad mix because he's just got this one element that's stuck together that you can't actually AI out or whatever you want to do in Atmos. You have to actually intentionally make those sounds, separate those sounds out and
Yeah.
recreate
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
sounds.
And you guys playing in this field right now, looking ahead of 5 years, what excites you? What development in as far as audio production or audio technology excites you guys? Any new
Yeah,
or
I think
new
the
innovations on
the
the
virtual
horizon?
reality stuff. Yeah. I
Okay.
think because I think that's I've tried on the Vision Pro in Berlin, and it was unbelievable. Like, it's I definitely think there's a big future for that content. And then I think just overall for me, what excites me is being able to take what we hear in the studio, because this is the best way I've ever listened to music,
Yeah.
being able to know that consumer experience is just getting better and better and better and closer to what we experience in a proper room like this. So, I think in 5 years from now, the consumer is going to have a multitude of ways to listen to Atmos content, and it just makes the music listening experience better. It makes it more emotional. It makes it, I mean, you can tell when you listen to it for the first time, that's what it does. It makes the music more tangible. It's just the
Yeah.
best way to listen to music for me. So I'm excited for the consumer to get a better experience of that.
And the misnomer is often that, oh, you can only experience it if you've got 12 speakers or whatever. And it's not. It's like you went, I mean, from a literal purchasing power point of view, you went and bought 2 extra speakers because you felt
Yeah.
the power of the audio.
Yeah.
In your example of your soundbar, and that's proof to me that a brand can go, oh well, there is value in this.
Right. This takes us to the very last thing that I'd like to hear from you guys, which is the 4 rules of thumb. When it comes to just producers, what should they follow if they want their productions to
I'll start
sound
with
as
the
good as
first
they want? 4 rules.
Yeah. The first one for me, which is it's my North Star, is the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers. Doesn't matter how you get there. I don't care what your EQ looks like. I don't care if you've boosted your highs by 14 dBs. I don't care if your compressor is on a weird setting. I don't care about any of it because the end consumer is never going to hear that. He's never going to see your session. The only thing that matters is what it sounds like. And the only thing that matters is what that sound can make someone feel. That's
Sure.
the end all for me as a number one.
Technical as you can want to get, it's like at the end of the day, that doesn't matter to your average consumer who's just going to hear the music and want to feel something.
Yeah. And then second one
for me, as the thing I said before, is intentionality. I think people aren't intentionally making things. They're haphazardly for vibes doing stuff, and I think doing things with intention is a big game changer.
Yeah, and then I would say community, collaboration. We're not big enough on that in South Africa. Everyone's in their own corners and in their own holes, and that's terrible. I think we should collaborate more. I think we should share more. I think we should upskill people because the rising tide lifts all boats. We really believe that,
Yeah.
The ethos of the studio, actually.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The last one?
No, I was going to say community as my last.
I had one and now I forgot about it. It slipped my mind.
Oh.
Okay, but we've got great ones. I mean, we've got what really matters is what comes out of your speakers as your number one, as you said. And the second one is what really you have been emphasizing on throughout our discussion is intentionality, just planning for your production and collab. And I couldn't agree with you more there. That's obviously something that is important because if you do collab, that's how you come up with something that is better than if it was one one head onto a production as such.
Oh, I have a fourth one.
You have a fourth one. Please give us the fourth one.
Build systems and factories to make the thing that you want to make.
Yes.
So I'm very big on this, like
templatizing
your life. I think so many people are against templates, and that's a whole other discussion we can have for 4 hours. But it's so many people are against this idea of creating templates for things because they think it's going to lock them in or it takes the creativity away. But it actually does the complete opposite when you do it right. A template shouldn't have a sound in it or anything, but it should be a workflow that you can consistently execute on and over time refine. I always say to people, I have no interest in making one song. I have an interest in making a factory that can make 100 songs. So let me try and figure out what that factory, I think Elon's, love him, hate him, whatever the thing is, but he once said making one car is really easy. Building a factory that makes 1,000 cars is a very difficult problem to solve. And I think we've got a similar problem in production and creative work, is that so many people just want to be creative and they don't focus on what does the process look like?
Yeah.
What is my step one? Where do I start? Where do I end? And how do I get there? And how frustrating is that? And is there a way that I can make that easier for myself and for clients? Because it's like I often see, I can tell you horror stories about jobs where people don't have processes and then the whole thing is a complete disaster, because they just don't have a workflow. So workflow
and
template
take 10 times longer to do.
Take longer. If I always say to people, if I can get to the same result, 2 processes, one takes me 2 days to do and the other one takes me an hour to do, but I get the same result, I will pick the hour process every single time because then I can take the rest of the time and play with my dogs, or I can, what I'm saying? Like I can live and I'm not stuck in this minutia of working in a way that's just slow and tedious and very big on that.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's valuable information. Thank you guys. Thank you for all the nuggets, all the things that you've shared. If there's anything that I can take away from this is really the fact that you need to plan for your production, and as far as audio is concerned, it's do it with intention. Jean-Michel as well as Rici, thank you so much, guys, and you guys do great work. And by the way, where do we find you?
Socials are methodxmadness.studio or our website methodxmadness.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on the Creative One.
Thanks for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, super nice. Thank you.
Lovely stuff. And if this was valuable for you, if it's something that you can share to somebody else that probably thinks that all that matters is visuals, please do share it, and see you in the next episode of The Creative One. Cheers.